Valerie McDaniel, a 46-year-old successful woman, had it all in her life, except for love. Then one day in 2015, she crossed paths with 37-year-old Leon Jacob, a confident doctor who seemed like the man of her dreams. Valerie was content with him, living the life she'd always wanted in Houston, Texas. Their smiles held the hope of a wonderful future together. But was Leon truly the Prince Charming Valerie had been searching for in her life? But Valerie's friends had a gut feeling that something was off about Leon. Valerie was head over heels in love with Leon. Surprisingly, their world was turned upside down on March 10, 2017, when the police arrived at their apartment with the shocking news that Mac McDaniel, Valerie's ex-husband, had been found dead. There were such profound and shocking secrets in this story that on March 27, 2017, it ultimately drove Valerie to take her own life by jumping from her apartment balcony. So what could have happened that pushed her to make such a tragic decision? Also, was Mac dead? Valerie Busick McDaniel, born on January 12, 1969, hailed from the well-to-do family in Harris County, Texas, USA. She was more than just an average person. People who knew her couldn't help but praise her generosity, intelligence, creativity, and her all-around sweet and kind nature. As she grew up, Valerie was not only good-hearted, but also an exceptional student. In 1987, she soared to the top of her class, becoming the valedictorian of her graduating class at Episcopal High School, USA. Post-high school, her quest for knowledge led her to the University of St. Thomas in Houston, where she pursued her undergraduate degree. But Valerie didn't stop there. In 1997, she achieved a remarkable milestone by earning her doctorate in veterinary medicine from the prestigious Texas A&M University. Valerie's journey was one of both academic excellence and a warm, generous spirit. While at the same university, Valerie's path crossed with a man named Marion McDaniel, affectionately known as Mac. Love blossomed quickly between them, and in a whirlwind romance, they decided to tie the knot on August 16, 1997. They ventured into a married life in style, moving into a luxurious house generously provided by Valerie's parents. Valerie had a taste for the finer things in life, and their home was no exception. It was a high-rise condominium nestled in River Oaks, often dubbed the Beverly Hills of Houston. Their collection of luxury cars added to their glamorous lifestyle, and they even owned a charming beach house on Tiki Island. Valerie loved to host her friends there on the weekends, making it her personal paradise, sometimes without Mac by her side. It was the beginning of an exciting chapter in her story. Valerie did have a taste for luxury, but deep down her heart belonged to animals. This love led her to fulfill a dream, opening her own veterinary clinic, the Montrose Veterinary Clinic in Houston. Her husband Mac joined her in this venture, taking on the role of office manager. Starting a business is no walk in the park, and they both dedicated countless hours to making it a success. Unfortunately, their dedication came at a cost. They didn't have much quality time left for each other. As their marriage progressed, Valerie's friends and acquaintances noticed a change in her demeanor. She had a heavy heart, and many attributed this to Mac's harsh and abrasive language and his reluctance to engage in social gatherings. It seemed like he was never keen on joining in on any get-togethers, leaving Valerie feeling alone in her social pursuits. Dr. Brittany King, a veterinarian working alongside Valerie, witnessed her pain firsthand. She recalled it would be just a text or a phone call, and then Valerie would be in tears. It's heart-wrenching to watch someone in so much pain. Despite the hardships, they clung to the hope of becoming parents. However, Valerie had a medical condition that prevented her from having biological children. But this didn't deter them. In a heartwarming decision, they chose to embrace adoption as a path to fulfilling their dreams of parenthood. It was finally in 2008 their dream came true, when they adopted a precious 2-day-old daughter. They had hoped it would strengthen their bond, but sadly, trouble followed soon after. Out of the blue, Valerie got a shocking phone call from a stranger, claiming to be Max's ex-girlfriend. What made it even more worse that this caller shared a list of names showing that Mac was cheating on Valerie with other women. It was a devastating revelation that shook their relationship to its core. When Valerie confronted Mac about his infidelity, he offered just a simple apology. It was a painful moment that deeply hurt Valerie. However, her love for him and the desire to keep their family intact led her to give him another chance. She didn't want to risk losing custody of their daughter, but sadly, it seemed that Mac's love for his wife had waned, and he didn't waste much time before betraying Valerie by cheating on her once again. After 17 years of marriage, Valerie had reached a breaking point. Her world was shattered when she came back home early and found out that Mac had been involved with another woman right in their own home. Valerie's emotions boiled over into pure rage, and for the first time, she uttered the word divorce. In February 2014, she took a bold step by filing for divorce and asked for full custody of their 8-year-old daughter. It was a difficult decision, but Valerie knew it was time for a major change in her life. In her divorce petition, Valerie detailed a string of alleged infidelities, financial recklessness, and even violent behavior that she claimed Mac had been involved in. Valerie also shed light on the strained dynamics of their relationship, formally requesting legal protection. She wanted Mac to be restrained from using threatening, vulgar, profane, obscene, or offensive language when communicating with her. Their divorce proceedings reached a conclusion in August 2016, and Valerie ended up keeping the primary property in Houston, along with her cherished veterinary clinic. In contrast, Mac was granted the beach house and a substantial compensation of $1.2 million. To cover the compensation, Valerie had to take out a loan, which was a source of great distress for her. But eventually, she finally got custody of her daughter. During this challenging time, Mrs. Golda Jacob, Valerie's next-door neighbor, played a crucial role as her attorney, assisting her the divorce process. Interestingly, Mrs. Jacob's 37-year-old son, Leon Jacob, was also living with her at the time. It was during this period that he got to know Valerie, setting the stage for a significant turn of events in their lives. One day, out of the blue, Leon showed up at Valerie's doorstep and introduced himself. At first, Valerie thought that he was a bit cocky and full of himself, but as they spent more time together, her opinion changed. She began to see Leon as not only good-looking, but also as a man who truly understood her. With him, Valerie felt a love and comfort she had never experienced with Mac. Leon, who was 8 years younger than Valerie, and also a doctor, made her realize that life in her 40s still held plenty of adventures. She finally had a man who loved and paid her the attention she had always yearned for. Following her divorce, Valerie and her daughter made a move to a swanky apartment building in Houston. At the start, Valerie tried to keep her relationship with Leon low-key. But as time passed, Leon ended up moving in with them, which made Valerie appear genuinely content, and her friends and family were thrilled for her, especially after the difficult relationship she had endured before. However, Mac, her ex-husband, didn't share the same enthusiasm for Leon's presence. He was uncomfortable with the idea of Leon staying with his daughter, which stirred up tension and disagreements regarding their daughter's custody. So who exactly was Leon Jacob, and what was the past that would become a central factor in the unfolding events of our story? To understand everything, let's first delve into Leon's background. Leon Jacob's journey began in 1980 in New Jersey, born into a well-to-do family. His father was a skilled surgeon, and his mother Golda Jacob was an attorney. Leon, the older of 2 sons, enjoyed a privileged upbringing and received an outstanding education at prestigious boarding schools during his formative years. However, life took a painful turn when tragedy struck at the age of 13, when Leon lost his father. Despite this hardship, Leon forged ahead, eventually choosing a path in medicine, following in his late father's footsteps. In 2021, Leon tied the knot with Annie Morrison, who worked as an attorney for a pharmaceutical company. Together, they welcomed 2 sons into their family, building what seemed like a happy life together. However, in March 2011, a few months after discovering they were expecting their second child, their world took a dramatic turn when Leon's residency was terminated because Annie had discovered he was having an extramarital affair with a mutual friend. She soon filed for divorce in 2013 after 12 years of marriage, citing experiencing extreme mental cruelty during their time together as the reason for this difficult decision. In the end, she also got custody of her 2 sons. But even after the divorce, Leon couldn't seem to let go of his obsession. He found himself in legal trouble, facing charges of stalking, cyber harassment threats, and incessant phone calls to his ex-wife, Annie. His excuse was that he was desperate to talk to his sons, and he believed she was keeping them away from him. However, circumstances eventually forced him to move away from his ex-wife and children. In 2014, he relocated to Pittsburgh to pursue his doctor's residency program. It was there that he crossed paths with Megan Varikas, who was 33 years old at the time, setting the stage for a new chapter in his life. The two first crossed paths at the hotel where Megan worked, and despite their initial meeting, it didn't take long for love to bloom between them, and they decided to move in together. Their journey led them to Houston, where Leon embarked on a new residency program. They seemed to be living a lavish lifestyle, enjoying vacations, fancy dinners, and extravagant outings. However, it turned out that Megan was the sole financial provider for all these luxuries, and Leon contributed neither personally nor financially. What's truly intriguing was this was not Leon's first attempt at residency. In fact, it was his seventh. The startling fact is that he had been dismissed from every previous residency program he had been a part of. This aspect of Leon's past becomes a pivotal and fascinating element of his story. Leon's downfall in previous residency programs was largely due to his problematic attitude. He had a habit of coming across overly confident, acting like he was the absolute best. In class, he consistently showed disrespect to his professors and fellow students. But his issues went beyond arrogance. He never received an offer for a second residency year at St. Vincent's due to his unreliability, inability to stay focused, and distracting behavior. What's even more concerning was that his behavior was not just bad, it was noted as bizarre and alarming. Leon's behavior in those residency programs raised serious concerns among his fellow residents. They reported that Leon posed as a real threat, especially to patients. As a result, hospitals chose not to renew his contract, and on January 23, 2009, the University of Texas Health Science Center delivered the final blow, notifying Leon that his residency wouldn't be renewed. The reasons were clear. Leon's inflated sense of grandiosity which clouded his decision-making, his lack of insight on professional conduct, and his tendency to be argumentative and confrontational. Adding to his list of troubles, Leon also had harassed a female physician at the institution by bombarding her with relentless phone calls. He demanded her to retract a statement she had made against him. This harassment escalated to such an extreme level that the physician had no choice but to confide in her supervisor about it. The situation reached a breaking point on February 25, 2011. When authorities had to intervene, Leon was forcefully removed from the premises of Northside Medical Center in Ohio and given a stern warning never to come back. This marked his sixth residency program, and just like the previous 5, he had been shown the door. The common thread was his overconfidence, even in the face of his limited abilities. Leon seemed unwilling to learn because he believed he already knew everything there was to know. This pattern of behavior and arrogance became a recurring theme in his medical career. In 2012, Leon's behavior took a disturbing turn, moving from problematic to downright criminal. He faced charges for breaking into the home of the head of the residency program that had previously dismissed him, but the trouble didn't end there. In 2014, he found himself in legal trouble again. This time charge was cyberstalking and harassing his ex-wife, Annie. This resulted in a sentence of 11 months in jail, though in the end he ended up serving only probation. Leon's record spanned across 4 states and included a long list of charges. These include a minimum of 8 counts of assault on family members, 13 counts of harassment, 4 counts of terrorist threats, burglary, kidnapping, aggravated assault, violation of protection orders, and more. All of these alarming details about Leon's history played a pivotal role in Mac. Valerie's ex-husband wanting to keep his daughter away from Leon. Clearly, Leon's past issues raised serious concerns about his suitability and state of mind. It had been 3 years into their relationship, and Megan began to uncover the hidden aspects of Leon's life that he had tried so hard to keep secret. Despite his efforts, Megan gradually pieced things together until she knew everything. When she finally confronted Leon about it, things took a violent turn. Leon, known for his fiery temper, erupted in attack against Megan. At that moment, Megan reached her breaking point and made a firm decision. She had enough, and she promptly kicked Leon out of her apartment. Megan made some serious allegations against him, including claims of physical assault, verbal abuse, and even an instance where he covered her mouth, of course Leon vehemently defending himself, insisting that these accusations were entirely untrue, setting the stage for a tense and conflicting situation. Even after their troubled breakup, Leon continued to keep Megan in his sights. In February 2017, he faced charges of stalking and assault in connection with Megan. This wasn't just a one-time occurrence. It happened repeatedly. There was even a 911 call from a concerned coworker who reported that someone was trying to stalk her boss, and it left her feeling frightened and uneasy. But Leon was adamant in refusing to accept any of the charges against him. He staunchly denied everything, holding on to the belief that he was the upstanding man he saw himself as. This was the point where Leon's true character began to surface. While Leon may not have been the exceptional doctor he believed himself to be, his career meant the world to him. In 2017, while facing charges of stalking and harassment by the police, his lawyer delivered a harsh reality. If Megan testified against him in court, could lose his medical license forever, which would end his career as a doctor. And of course, Leon couldn't bear the thought of his carefully constructed image as a great doctor and a remarkable person falling apart. So, driven by this fear, he made a shocking decision. He sought out a hitman to eliminate Megan from the equation. For this, Leon met up with a man named Motez Aze, a fellow U.S. Army veteran, through a mutual acquaintance. Leon hired Motez, who often went by the name Zach, for a disturbing task. He wanted Megan kidnapped to stop her from testifying against him in court. For this dangerous job, Leon paid Zach $9,000. However, Zach maintained a firm denial that he had ever entertained the idea of taking money to harm another person. He adamantly asserted that he was not a violent individual. Leon's scheme had three distinct phases. Initially, Zach's task was to abduct Megan and instill such fear in her that she chose not to reunite with Leon. If this tactic failed, they would proceed to phase 2, which involved frightening Megan by any means necessary, pushing her to leave town and avoid the court proceedings, effectively disappearing from their lives. And if despite all efforts, Megan remained resolute, phase 3 represented the dire last resort. She would have to be killed. And for that, Leon provided Zach with various methods to carry out Megan's potential murder, including one particularly sinister suggestion, injecting a syringe of potassium directly into her heart to trigger a fatal heart attack. Surprisingly, when Leon approached Zach with this disturbing request, Zach viewed it as not as an opportunity to harm someone, but as a chance to save a life. Zach did indeed accept the money from Leon, taking it for himself, but he had zero intention of causing harm to anyone. Zach had no regrets about taking Leon's money under false pretenses. As Leon anxiously awaited Zach to carry out his plan, Zach unexpectedly disappeared and left town without harming Megan in any way. This left Leon in a state of panic, not only because he had lost $9,000, but because also Megan was still alive and could potentially expose his dark past, which could tarnish his name further. So to get out of this and being desperate to locate Zach and salvage his sinister plan, Leon turned to a well-known bail bondsman, Michael Kabash, who had assisted him in previous legal matters. Leon also asked Michael to track down as he had some unfinished matters with him, whereas Michael in turn reached out to the police for assistance in finding Zach. However, there was a bit of a challenge because Zach's real name was Muatz Azza, so it took some time for the authorities to finally track him down. It was during this investigation that for the first time, police uncovered the full extent of Leon's sinister intentions, clarified to the police that he never intended to harm anyone. Instead, he believed it was his duty to take that money from Leon and prevent it from falling into the hands of someone who might actually harm Megan. However, the police had their doubts about Zach's story, although they were convinced of Leon's guilt due to his troubled history and the clear attempt to harm Megan. Still, there was a problem. They lacked concrete evidence to prove it in court. In such high-profile cases, it's important to focus on each and every little detail. So, Instead of immediately acting on Zach's statements, the police decided to devise their own plan, and for that, they approached Zach and asked him if he would cooperate in catching Leon red-handed, and Zach agreed to help. With the use of a wiretap, the police set up a call between Zach and Leon, allowing them to eavesdrop on their entire conversation. During the call, Zach told Leon that he wasn't suitable for the task and suggested that Leon should seek out someone else for whatever plan he had in mind, and for that he even knew a hitman who would be capable of doing whatever he wanted. During this time, Leon was also in a relationship with Valerie, and they were sharing a life together. Now, due to Leon's troubled history, Valerie's ex-husband, Mac, wanted to regain custody of their daughter. However, Valerie was fiercely protective of her child and didn't want to give her up to Mac under any circumstances. So here Leon saw this as an opportunity and persuaded Valerie that the real issue for her was Mac and that he could potentially tear their family apart and take her daughter away in the future. This was happening at the same time that Leon was having a second conversation with Zach, and seeing an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, he proposed a startling deal. At this moment, Zach found himself in a confusing situation and was not entirely sure what Leon meant. So he asked for clarification from Leon about what the second problem was, and Leon's response was quite shocking. Leon stated that he wanted Valerie's ex-husband, Mac, eliminated as well. What made it even more astonishing was that Leon claimed that Valerie was completely on board with this plan, and she also wanted Mac to be taken out of the picture. But one thing Leon was unaware of was that the new hitman he was dealing with was actually a professional undercover police officer named Javier Duran from the Houston Police Department. Javier's mission was to gather evidence against Leon for plotting not just one, but two murders. So the following day, they arranged to meet Leon and Valerie at an Olive Garden restaurant. Over bowls of soup and sandwiches, they delved into the discussions about the sinister plans for these hits. As Leon finished outlining his part of the dark plan, Javier turned his attention to Valerie to learn her intention regarding Mac's fate. During a 2-hour lunch conversation, Valerie and Javier discussed the grim details of how Mac might meet his end. Valerie cautiously asked, "Let's say something were to happen to him. What would it look like? Could it be a car accident?" At this, Javier offered various possibilities, suggesting that it could resemble a tragic car wreck or a botched robbery. Valerie expressed her deep fear that Mac would take her daughter away from her, and that she felt cornered with no other options left. Shockingly, Valerie didn't shy away from the sinister plan. Even she actively agreed to have Mac killed. As they discussed the details, Valerie seemed to believe that Mac would fall victim to a carjacking and end up with a fatal gunshot to the head. Although she hesitated a bit as the lunch drew to a close, she ultimately gave the green light for this horrific plot. Could have been a successful plan, but what they failed to realize was how suspicious it would appear to the police. In such cases where hitman targets both the ex-girlfriend and ex-husband of a current couple, law enforcement would naturally become suspicious. When initial leads and primary suspects are elusive, investigators often turn their attention to ex-partners, suspecting their involvement in the murders. The next day, on March 9, 2017, Detective Javier paid Leon and Valerie a visit. Unveiling a set of disturbing photos, one depicted Mark in his car, blood-soaked, while another showed him sprawled on the pavement, with blood on his face and a bullet wound to his head. These pictures perfectly mirrored their discussion, creating the illusion of a robbery or a carjacking gone horribly awry. Leon and Valerie had genuine confidence that their problem was finally solved. If you're wondering the same, whether Mac had met his demise, and this marked the conclusion of our tale, you're in for a surprise. The twist is, and Valerie's problems weren't disappearing anytime soon. In fact, things were about to get seriously intriguing, because Mac was very much alive. After the Olive Garden meeting, Detective Javier reached out to Mac, revealing all the sinister plans concocted by Leon and Valerie. To make the photos convincing, they used pig's blood and enlisted a makeup artist to create a realistic bullet wound. Mac, on board with the plan from the start, determined to cooperate fully with the authorities to expose their scheme. However, was utterly shocked by the revelation. When the police informed him about Valerie's plot to have him killed, he couldn't believe it. He acknowledged their troubled history, but couldn't fathom that things had escalated to the point where she'd hire a hitman. It was a sight of Valerie he never expected to see. Meanwhile, Leon and Valerie, unaware of Mac's cooperation with the police, remained hopeful that their plan would succeed. Were now eagerly anticipating the news about Megan's fate. And it didn't take long, as on that very night, Leon and Valerie's phones pinged with picture messages from Javier. These photos depicted Megan with her hands bound and duct tape across her mouth, eyes filled with terror. What Leon and Valerie didn't know was that Megan had been informed of the plan and was cooperating with the police. However, shortly after sending those photos, Javier made a distressing call to Leon, claiming that Megan had become uncontrollable, leaving him with no choice but to take her life. The reason why Megan's reactions in those photos were incredibly authentic was because she experienced a genuine meltdown. The gravity of the situation hit her hard. She understood that if Leon's sinister plan has succeeded, she might have faced a terrifying reality, being kidnapped and potentially losing her life. The next day, on March 10, 2017, around 3 a.m., the police arrived at Valerie and Leon's apartment with body cameras rolling, ready to record the reactions. It was the moment they had to deliver the grim news to Valerie. Her ex-husband, Mac, had become the victim of a shooting, and tragically, he was no more. The police noticed something rather strange when they delivered the heartbreaking news. Valerie, a skilled veterinarian, but certainly no actor, seemed oddly composed. Her reaction, or lack thereof, didn't match what you'd expect from someone in her situation. She appeared rather cold, as if she didn't quite know how to act to convince the officers that she was genuinely shocked and saddened by the news. As Leon entered the scene, the officers informed him too about Mac's tragic passing. Seems that Leon was a somewhat better actor than Valerie in this situation. He quickly tried to comfort Valerie and appeared genuinely shocked by the news. However, his newfound acting skills were short-lived, as he made a crucial mistake. By casually mentioning that he had been at home all day. This comment raised suspicion for the police because it seemed like he was overly eager to provide an alibi, a behavior often associated with individuals who may have something to hide. The police let Leon and Valerie continue their amateur acting for a few more moments, perhaps relishing their attempts to put on a show. The couple did their best to feign sorrow and shock, but then, in a twist for Leon and Valerie, they dropped the bombshell. Both Megan and Mac were alive, and they both actively participated in creating those fake photos. The shock that spread across Leon and Valerie's faces this time was genuine, as the unexpected twist left them speechless, and they realized they were in serious trouble. As Valerie was led away from her apartment, she came face to face with Mac, who had been patiently waiting outside. He was there to take his daughter back home, and Valerie had no choice to hand over her sleeping daughter to Mac. It was a heart-wrenching moment, and little did Valerie know it would be the last time she saw her daughter. Both Valerie and Leon were arrested on charges related to murder conspiracy. Leon, on the other hand, couldn't make bail due to his past charges involving Megan. Meanwhile, Valerie was granted bail and she returned home, awaiting her upcoming trial. After making bail, Valerie was stuck under house arrest, with the relentless press besieging her apartment building. She was under constant surveillance by cameras and reporters hungry for sensational stories. The most painful loss was her daughter, a heartache beyond measure. As each new story circulated, more and more people discovered the truth about her actions, and Valerie felt trapped with no way out. Her world had collapsed and the walls of her apartment seemed to close in as the public scrutiny intensified. It was a situation she couldn't escape, and the future looked bleak. Her once comforting space had become a prison, with no one to offer solace, not even her beloved daughter. To make matters worse, her veterinary license was suspended, cutting off her ability to work. The weight of her circumstances was becoming unbearable, and she longed for relief from the unending ordeal. At this time, Valerie battled intense emotions and spiraled into a deep depression. She reached out to some of her colleagues who couldn't help but notice her overwhelming emotional state and profound sadness during their meeting. In hindsight, they understood that this encounter was Valerie's way of bidding them a final farewell. Sadly, on March 27, 2017, Valerie faced a devastating moment of despair. She made the fateful decision to jump from her 7-story apartment balcony. But that wasn't all. During the police search of Valerie's apartment, they discovered a voice message, the only trace she left behind. It was a poignant recording made just moments before her fateful leap. In this message, Valerie poured out her heart, revealing her profound love for Leon and her deep affection for her daughter. Her voice held the weight of her emotions as she tried to explain the complex feelings that had brought her to this tragic point in her life. She expressed her deep regrets, clarifying that she never intended for events to spiral out of control. She didn't want harm to come to Mac, but she also couldn't bear the thought of losing her daughter. Valerie had once dreamt of a beautiful future, but her actions had led her down a tragic path. In the final recording, she tried to convey that, despite the circumstances, she wanted people to know she wasn't the monster her actions might suggest. Valerie knew that there was a daunting road ahead, and that the legal battle and the tarnished reputation would be incredibly challenging. Her friends and family were shocked because they knew a different Valerie, one they couldn't believe was capable of these actions. They realized that she couldn't bear the weight of her deeds and chose to end her life for a sense of freedom. Her colleagues from the vet clinic held cherished memories of the special person she once was in their lives. Where everyone mourned for Valerie's demise, the person she cherished most, Leon, notably distanced himself from the grief. In an unexpected and rather cold response, he remarked, "It's nothing to do with me. She took the easy way out. I can't be held responsible for her actions. I didn't ask her to get involved. It was her ideas. She got me involved, and she had to face the consequences of her own actions." On March 20th, 2018, Leon found himself on trial, facing 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder. As the legal battle unfolded, Leon's defense adopted a somewhat predictable strategy. With Valerie no longer present to defend herself, they attempted to shift the blame entirely on her shoulders. Their narrative painted Valerie as the mastermind behind every stage of the sinister plot, leaving Leon as the manipulated and unwilling participant in her alleged schemes. The prosecution, however, had 2 powerful witnesses, Valerie's ex-husband Mac and Leon's ex-girlfriend Megan, who was already involved in an ongoing case against Leon. When Megan took to stand, she didn't hold back, describing Leon as a criminal who subjected her to troubling incidents like grabbing her by the mouth, assaulting her, and stalking her. She testified that Leon had a controlling nature and always needed to assert dominance in every situation. Megan's bold testimony must have frustrated him to no end. When it was Leon's turn to testify in court, he took a rather peculiar stance and said, "I didn't ask Zach or Javier to kill anyone. I was not involved in any plot or conspiracy to murder. I am the one who is taking the blame for Valerie." Furthermore, the defense team argued that the police were overly eager to execute a successful undercover operation. They claimed that Javier had been instructed to lead Leon into suggesting ways to harm Megan. The defense's perspective painted Leon as the victim of an overzealous police force that seemed determined to make him confess to wanting Megan dead. The prosecution strongly opposed defense, emphasizing that when Leon saw those disturbing photos of terrified Megan, he didn't lift a finger to stop them from harming her. Not once did he ask Javier to spare her or prevent any harm. It appeared as if he was content with her being killed, to protect himself. In a final blow, the prosecution unveiled Leon's dark past to the jury. They laid bare how he had not only stalked Megan, but also his ex-wife, Annie, exposing his undeniable pattern of controlling behavior. After a little over an hour of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom, and in April 2018, the inevitable verdict of guilt was announced. The sentencing hearing followed shortly after, and in a clever move, the prosecution called upon Leon's ex-wife, Annie, as a witness. They questioned her about her past experiences with him during her pregnancy. She had something significant to share. She said, "He wasn't physically violent to me at first. He used to just throw things around the room. He was verbally abusive to me, but his behavior got worse. He used to grab me, push me, and one time I remember he grabbed me by my head and pushed it into the kitchen counter, so hard that it bruised my face. I don't recall what the fight was about, but I remember him threatening to punch me and then he started kicking my legs. I was trying hard to protect my stomach and the baby. He said that if I ever left him, he would kill me and nobody would ever find my body. After hearing Annie's testimony, there was no escaping the consequences for Leon. In March 2018, he was handed a life sentence for both counts of soliciting capital murder. And his chance for parole won't come until 2047, when he'll be 69 years old. Megan expressed her thoughts on the sentencing, saying, "I couldn't see it at the time, but looking back I believe Leon manipulated me. He used his look and his seeming charms to persuade me to leave my family, my home, the life I built in Pittsburgh. I lost everything, my career, friends, colleagues, all as a result of his controlling behavior. But now the girl he called poor and uneducated is responsible for him going to prison for a very long time. Leon's future is now marred by a life behind bars. He won't experience his children's growth or return to the world of medicine. He is incarcerated and parole isn't even on the horizon until 2047. Surprisingly, his time behind bars hasn't brought a significant transformation in him. Leon once pondered from his prison confines, questioning the unpredictability of life, where violence can suddenly emerge. He finds it odd that he is now surrounded by the very criminals he once treated as a doctor. Leon vehemently refuses to accept responsibility for his crimes. He maintains that he was wrongly convicted and that Valerie masterminded the murder plots. In his eyes, he was a doctor who healed, not a monster who murdered. He even envisions a movie about these events with Bradley Cooper as the actor portraying him, noting their physical resemblance. Well, we'll leave it to you to decide if Leon really looks like Bradley Cooper. Megan and Mac had finally found peace and moved forward from their troubled past, relieved to have Leon utter their lives. It's a sad truth that many women who crossed paths with Leon ended up worse for it, despite his charm and charisma. Beneath his exterior, he proved to be nothing more than a common criminal, specializing in domestic abuse. Yet Valerie McDaniel's role remains a complex puzzle. Was she a victim of Leon's manipulation, or did she willingly participate in a plot to take two lives? The line between victim and accomplice in her case is a blurry one, making it challenging to fully understand her role in this tragic story. Valerie unfortunately could never share her side of the story, but the evidence paints a complex picture. She was captured on tape alongside Leon, expressing her desire for her ex-husband's demise. Her attempt to act shocked when the police arrived at her apartment makes it challenging to argue that she wasn't a willing participant in this sinister plot. However, her actions could have been out of character, given her strong and determined nature. She was not a weak person. She fought for what she wanted in life. She wasn't old, and she had many years ahead of her. Perhaps the fear of sharing custody of her beloved daughter with Mac, fueled by Leon's influence, pushed her into a dark and unexpected path. Even today, those who knew Valerie refused to accept that she was a bad person. They believed that she was under the control of Leon, manipulated into a dark path. Many argue that it was he who hatched the murderous plot, not her. In this intricate story, one character's identity has remained hidden throughout: Valerie's daughter. She's fortunate to have one parent left to care for her, but she will grow up knowing that her mother loved her deeply. Yet she'll also learn of the unusual circumstances that led to her mother's profound unhappiness and the tragic event that unfolded when she jumped from a 7th-floor balcony. It's a tale filled with complexities and unanswered questions. Now, it's up to you to decide whether Valerie was a victim, caught in a web of manipulation, or a willing participant in this intricate tale. This story presents a complex narrative with differing perspectives, leaving room for interpretation. In the early morning hours of July 20th, 1971, a distress call was made to the Burlington, Vermont Police Department. A concerned woman reported the tragic murder of her roommate, Rita Curran. Upon returning home from work, she discovered Rita's lifeless body lying in a pool with her own blood on their shared bed. The scene was horrifying, indicating that an intruder had broken into their apartment and subjected Rita to a brutal attack involving physical assault, sexual assault, and strangulation. It was evident that Rita had fought fiercely against her assailant. The identity of Rita's killer remained a haunting mystery for both her family and the Burlington Police Department for many years, despite their exhaustive investigation and pursuit of numerous leads. However, after 52 long years, the perpetrator was finally identified. Rita Curran, born on June 21, 1947, in Brooklyn, Kings County, New York, was the beloved daughter of Thomas and Mary Curran. Described as a kind-hearted, generous, and beautiful individual, Rita was known for her gentle nature and her aversion to causing harm to others. At the age of 24, in the summer of 1971, she made the decision to move out of her parents' home for the first time and share an apartment on Brooks Avenue in Burlington, Vermont, with 3 other roommates who she had not yet formed a close bond with. Rita worked as a second-grade teacher at Milton Elementary School and was also pursuing graduate courses at the University of Vermont. During the summer break, she took on a job as a maid at a local motel. Tragically, just 2 weeks after leaving her family's house, Rita's life was brutally taken within the confines of her Burlington apartment. The police report indicated that she had been preparing for bed at the time of the attack, as she was found with curlers in her hair. The shocking murder of Rita Curran sent shockwaves of fear throughout the usually peaceful and welcoming city of Burlington. It was a time when many residents left their front doors unlocked, and this heinous crime shattered the sense of security within the community. It is possible that Rita Curran's apartment door was not locked at the time of her murder because there was no visible force used on the entrance door, as determined by the police investigation. During the investigation, the police collected evidence from the crime scene, including a single cigarette near Rita Curran's arm, which was believed to have been left by the killer to burn out. The police also interviewed Rita Curran's neighbors and followed up on hundreds of tips. Among the neighbors questioned were Williams and Michelle DeRuse, a newly wedded couple who lived 2 floors above Rita Curran at the time of her murder. They informed investigators that they had been together all night and had not heard or seen anything suspicious. The police have a list of 13 suspects, one of whom was Ted Bundy. It was discovered that the local motel where Rita Curran worked was located near Ted Bundy's birthplace, the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers. The murder and crime scene of Rita Curran bore similarities to Ted Bundy's modus operandi, leading retired FBI agent John Bassett to propose him as a suspect. In an attempt to find closure and determine if Ted Bundy was truly responsible for Rita Curran's murder, Mary Campbell Curran, Rita's sister, wrote a letter to Florala's death row where Ted Bundy was incarcerated. The FBI responded by informing her that Ted Bundy had refused to confirm or deny his involvement in Curran's death, and there was no concrete evidence placing him in Burlington on the date of the murder. However, Detective Robert B. Capel interviewed Ted Bundy, who later admitted to him that he had murdered a young woman in Burlington in 1971 while he was there gathering information about his birth. But on January 22, 1989, the night before his execution, Ted Bundy denied any involvement in Rita Curran's case to FBI Special Agent William Hackmeyer. With all leads exhausted and lacking advanced DNA technology to identify a suspect, the case remained unsolved for over 4 decades. According to Acting Police Chief John Murad of Burlington, the department has consistently pursued justice for Rita Curran's family. In 2014, the Burlington Police Department sent all the evidence from the crime scene, including the cigarette, to a forensic lab in New York City for DNA testing. Although the tests generated a DNA profile from the cigarette, it did not match any DNA in the databases maintained by law enforcement agencies nationwide. This suggested that the individual who left their DNA on the cigarette had likely never had their genetic material entered into the database, possibly due to a lack of felony convictions. Furthermore, the DNA testing did not match the known DNA of any of the 13 main suspects identified by the police. However, in 2019, Detective Lieutenant James Trebb decided to take a new approach to the case. Instead of assigning a single detective to work on the case, as was the usual department strategy, Lieutenant Trebb assembled a new team of detectives and expert technicians to review and discuss the Rita Curran case. This team treated the case as if it had just occurred, and they began retesting the evidence, including sending the cigarette for DNA analysis once again. This time, they utilized genetic genealogy, a process that utilizes DNA databases for genealogical research to identify potential family members of the individual whose DNA does not match any existing profiles. Following the DNA analysis, the genetic genealogy expert determined that the DNA on the cigarette had strong connections to relatives of William DeRose, a man who resided 2 floors above Rita Kern's apartment in 1971. William DeRose had been questioned by detectives alongside his wife and claimed to have been at home during the time of the murder. Subsequently, the investigators located a living half-brother of William DeRose who willingly provided a DNA sample. After conducting the test, it was ultimately determined that the DNA on the cigarette belonged to William DeRose. In 2022, additional evidence found of the crime scene, including Rita Kern's torn housecoat, was sent to a crime lab in Florida. At this lab, they utilized new DNA extraction techniques to further analyze the evidence. Prior to this, the detectives had sent the genetic evidence from the cigarette to a genealogy company. Their aim was to explore a larger DNA database that could potentially assist in identifying the killer. Remarkably, the scientist and genealogy expert were able to swiftly match the DNA from the cigarette to William DeRose. This breakthrough was achieved through extensive research of genealogical and public records. Furthermore, the DNA found on Rita Kern's ripped housecoat was also a match to the DNA on the cigarette butt. Subsequently, the investigators made a startling discovery. They learned that William DeRose had passed away at the age of 46 in 1986 due to a drug overdose at the San Francisco hotel. Shortly after Rita Kern's murder, he and his wife had left Vermont and eventually divorced. During an interview with the police, William DeRose's ex-wife, Michelle, revealed that she had lied in 1971 about her husband's whereabouts on the night of the incident. Michelle, who had relocated to Eugene, Oregon, and changed her name, explained that William DeRose had engaged in an argument with her on the evening of July 19, 1971. In an attempt to cool off, he had gone for a walk. He returned later that night and instructed Michelle to inform the investigating officers that he had never left their apartment. He warned her that his previous criminal record might unfairly make him a suspect in Rita Kern's death. Detective Thomas Chonnet, who conducted the interview with Michelle, expressed his skepticism regarding her knowledge of William DeRose being the killer. He believed that she was protecting him due to their recent marriage and their evident love for each other, as well as his criminal history. Following their divorce, William DeRose relocated to Cheland and became a monk. However, he returned to San Francisco, United States in 1974, where he met his second wife, Sarah Hepting. During an interview with the Burlington police, Sarah Hepting disclosed that William DeRose had a tendency for sudden outbursts of violence. She stated that there were 2 occasions where he had displayed extreme violence towards her. One of these instances occurred while they were conversing with a female friend, when he unexpectedly grabbed a pocket knife and stabbed the woman in her abdomen without any apparent reason. Although he was arrested, the woman chose not to press charges. Later, DeRose confessed to Hepting that he had mistakenly believed he had stabbed her. Hepting mentioned that the second incident of DeRose's violence took place during a dinner, when he suddenly began to strangle her for no apparent reason. This was the final straw for Hepting, leading her to leave him. Following the resolution of Rita Kern's case, her unfortunate parents passed away without ever knowing who had taken their daughter's life. However, her remaining family and friends remembered her and found solace in the closure the case provided. Jim Rabar, a former second-grade student of Rita Kern, fondly recalled her as a kind and beautiful person. He shared a memory of a play they performed together, where he played a dancing clown holding a teddy bear. Rita had gifted him the teddy bear, which he still cherishes, although he currently cannot locate it. Mary Kern Campbell, Rita's sister, expressed the sadness that 2 generations of their family have grown up without knowing her. Tom Curran, Rita's brother, focused more on the experiences their parents and Rita endured, rather than dwelling on the perpetrator. He prays to his parents and Rita for their peace. In closing the case, Lieutenant Trebb confidently stated that William DeRose was responsible for the aggravated murder of Rita Kern. However, due to his death from a drug overdose in a hotel room, he will not be held accountable for his actions. Nevertheless, the case will be officially closed. On January 18, 1981, at approximately 6:30 a.m. in Camarillo, California, located about 50 miles from Los Angeles, two newspaper delivery boys made a chilling discovery. They stumbled upon the lifeless body of Rachel Zendejas, a 20-year-old Oxnard college student and a single mother of two. Rachel had recently gone through a divorce and resided in an apartment complex on Mobile Avenue, just across the street from where her tragic fate awaited her. Sharing the apartment with her brother and two daughters, Rachel's life was abruptly cut short in the carport of the complex. Law enforcement swiftly arrived at the crime scene, collecting crucial evidence that would aid in their investigation. As detectives delved deeper into the case, they uncovered that Rachel had ventured out the evening prior to her murder in search of babysitters to care for her young girls. Returning home the following morning after dropping off the babysitters, Rachel was ambushed by her assailant as she exited her vehicle. The circumstances surrounding her murder were both heart-wrenching and perplexing. For years, the police tirelessly pursued leads and explored every possible avenue in their quest for justice. However, despite their relentless efforts, the case eventually grew cold as all leads were exhausted. The tragic murder of Rachel Zendejas remained unsolved, leaving her family and the community in a state of despair. Yet, just before the year's end, in the early hours of December 12, 1981, a neighbor's call to the police would once again ignite hope. The neighbor reported a fire outbreak at an apartment in Oxnard, breathing new life into the investigation. Upon receiving the emergency call, the Oxnard Fire Department swiftly responded to the location and promptly extinguished the raging fire. Subsequently, during their investigation, they made a grim discovery. The lifeless body of Lisa Gondek, a 21-year-old woman, was found unclothed in the apartment's bathtub. It was evident that she had been subjected to a heinous crime, as her assailant had not only raped and strangled her, but also set the apartment ablaze. Shockingly, despite the audible screams heard by her neighbors, they failed to alert emergency services until the smell of smoke permeated the air. Lisa Gondek, a retail worker residing in Oxnard, had attended a club at the Port Hueneme Naval Base on the night of December 11, 1981. Following her time at the disco with friends, she was dropped off at her home around 1:30 a.m. the next day. Tragically, she was discovered lifeless in her bathtub, and the identity of her killer remained unknown for several decades. Lisa Gondek had initially traveled from Connecticut to Oxnard for a planned 2-week visit to a friend in the U.S. Navy. However, she ultimately made the decision to relocate to Oxnard months before her untimely demise. Prior to her death, she had made a heartfelt promise to her loved ones, expressing her intention to spend Christmas with them, stating, "Mom, I'll be home for Christmas." Lisa Gondek relocated to Oxnard and moved in with a childhood best friend. She secured a job at a teen clothing store in the Esplanade Shopping Center. Despite being new to the area, she quickly formed new friendships. According to her roommate, Lisa was not only kind-hearted, but also possessed inner and outer beauty. Her roommate stated, "If Lisa had $1, she would willingly share it with you." The investigations into Rachel Zendejas and Lisa Gondek's cases were initially conducted separately. However, in 2002, the suspect's DNA found at Rachel Zendejas' crime scene were submitted to the FBI's combined DNA index system. A search was conducted in the criminal database for felons, but unfortunately, it did not yield any results. Nevertheless, in 2004, the investigators working on Lisa Gondek's case utilized DNA testing and informed the Ventura County Sheriff's Office that both Rachel Zendejas and Lisa Gondek's homicides were linked to a single suspect. Unfortunately, the DNA did not provide any identifiable information about the suspect, and the case went cold once again. Another intriguing connection was established between both women as they had visited a nightclub called Huntington in the hours leading up to their deaths. This nightclub, which is now closed, was a popular spot located across from the Esplanade Mall. In December 2019, the Cold Case Unit of Ventura County took charge of the investigations once again. They employed the use of genetic genealogy, an advanced form of DNA testing, to identify potential relatives of the suspects. This approach yielded new leads, and subsequent DNA testing confirmed that Tony Garcia was the prime suspect in both homicides. Surprisingly, Tony Garcia had been living in Oxnard all along, right under the noses of the detectives for over 4 decades. Born in Roswell, New Mexico, he had served in the U.S. Navy and was stationed Point Mugu near Oxnard. Although Tony Garcia was discharged from service in 1980, he chose to remain in Oxnard, where he pursued his passion for karate and became a dedicated student and instructor for many years. During the time of his arrest, Tony Garcia was employed as a carpenter. It remains uncertain whether he had any prior acquaintance with his victims. Tony Garcia faced charges of 2 counts of murder, along with additional allegations of committing murder while involved in a rape and committing murder while involved in a kidnapping. Upon his initial court appearance, he was instructed to be detained without bail. Following Tony Garcia's apprehension, Roy Rodriguez, the brother of Rachel Zenderges, expressed, "I am determined to bring closure to Rachel's case and fulfill my purpose." A hiker found human remains belonging to a male near Natural Bridges State Park in Santa Cruz County at 4:30 a.m. on October 6, 1982. Investigators determined that the unknown man's life had been taken by someone. For 41 years, the case remained cold until an important partnership with emerging forensic-grade genome sequencing was done by Othram Labs. Is the first private laboratory in North America that was purpose-built to generate human ID from forensic evidence and crime scene evidence. They are working on cases like this one all across North America and having a great deal of success. DNA extract that was derived from the victim's bones was sent to Othram from the California Department of Justice. Othram did what is called a suitability analysis on it and measured how much DNA is truly there. Othram Labs has the capability to look at hundreds of thousands of DNA markers, making it easier to find more distant relatives and reverse engineer back to the direct family. In this case, it was genealogy that pointed towards a family of the victim. The FBI then got involved, and they were able to use some fingerprinting once they had an idea of who it may be to confirm that identity. Law enforcement was able to take that important link and finally give a name to the body known for so long to investigators as John Doe. In October 2023, it was announced to the public that the human remains belonged to 28-year-old Rodney Allen Rumsey. Rodney was born on May 25, 1954. He lived in Sacramento, California. Michael Vaughan, the director of account management at Othram Lab, said this started out as an unidentified human remains case, and now they have an entirely new case that they are investigating. The community is impacted. The detectives are impacted. Decades of family members, and it feels really good, and we celebrated it, and then it is on to the next one. Rodney's left forearm had a red rose with 3 leaves on it and a tattoo of a skull on his left forearm. The skull had black braids, 3 red-tipped feathers jutting out from the head and red around the eye sockets. Lieutenant Karina Sicina, a spokeswoman for the Santa Cruz Police Departments, said investigators still have much work to do and will try to reach out to Rumsey's family. Anyone with information about this case may call the Santa Cruz Police Department's investigation unit at 831-420-5820 or the department's tip line at 831-420-0595. Patricia Chupko Bender's only child, Susan Robin Bender, was born in Modesto, California on November 27, 1970. Susan, who was 15 at the time, left her family's house on April 25, 1986 to spend the weekend with friends in Carmel by the Sea. To get to the Greyhound bus station at 10th and G Street, she walked alone. Susan ran into friends while she was waiting for the bus. She informed them of her coastal excursion and her intention to return in a few days. Susan used the payphone at the depot to make a call after their talk. After 10 minutes, a full-size 1977 Ford van with an olive green exterior arrived. Susan entered the car. Susan was last observed at this location. In the 1980s, it was not unheard of for a 15-year-old to have so much freedom. Susan's mother, Patricia Bender, assumed her daughter had arrived in Carmel safely and was enjoying herself with her friends. Susan's mother started to worry when she didn't make the usual phone call home. On May 1st, 1986, she reported her daughter missing. The The detectives quickly deduced that Susan had suffered a terrible fate. We have certain evidence to indicate foul play was involved in Susan Bender's disappearance, a detective told the local newspaper. The same newspaper was informed by Susan's mother that although Susan had fled home twice previously, she had always returned rather quickly. Patricia said before she vanished, "Things had been going well between us for a few months. There was no sign that she was planning to run away." She also mentioned that a male person of interest who was not identified had been discovered in possession of Susan's phone book, clothing, and diary. Patricia went on to say, "I fear she was attacked by a man who was questioned by the police, but never taken into custody. Despite having a lot of circumstantial evidence against him, they chose not to arrest him." Susan was never thought to have gone missing voluntarily by the police. In 1987, Detective Richard Rudiner, who was assigned to the case until his retirement in 2000, told a newspaper that he believed Susan was probably dead. According to an interview with Susan's mother from 1999, the police said there is little they can do without a body. That same year, Detective Rudiner said, "Susan Bender just fell off the face of the earth." The strangest thing about this case is that no information about her has surfaced in all these years, and no one has ever come forward to tell what happened to her. In 1999, two childhood friends from Linden, California, Lauren Herzog and Wesley Shermantine, also targeted young women in and around the nearby Stockton area. There was conjecture that Susan could have been one of their victims. Many of their victims remain unidentified. Although Susan disappeared while the men were occupied with their evil deeds, it is possible that the men had anything to do with her kidnapping, even though the authorities did not know. Susan's disappearance was consistent with their victim-focused strategy. However, Susan's case had never been connected to Herzog's or Shermantine's crimes, despite years of investigation. The 1980 and 1990 saw the two evil friends go on a rampage. They may have killed over 15 people, including several women. Meanwhile, Susan's case went unresolved for almost 40 years. Investigators had conversations with friends and family who had battled to preserve Susan's story. In 2021, Susan's friend, Sandy Silveria, made the following comment: "Where is she? What was her fate? It is necessary to hold whoever did this accountable." The Modesto Police Department declared in October 2021 that they had reopened the case in an effort to find the long-lost teenager. In reviewing this case, we identified potential areas of opportunity which may assist in moving this case forward, the department stated in a statement. This encompasses the application of technological innovations. We also think that, given the circumstances of the crime, there might be previously unidentified people who could know important details about Susan's disappearance. Investigators looking into cold cases in Modesto hoped that in the years since Susan vanished, more witnesses would feel inclined to come forward. In a statement released in 2022, the police department stated, "It's crucial to keep in mind that Susan was a young child living with a family. Regretfully, the family has not received justice or closure for 36 years. As an organization, it is our responsibility to help achieve some measure of closure while ultimately pursuing justice." Finally, on Thursday, August 17, 2023, Raymond Lewis Stafford was declared arrested by the Modesto Police Department. Lewis, who is now age 76, was arrested in Wills Point, 50 miles east of Dallas, where he had been residing for about 5 years on August 15, 2023. For decades, Stafford seemed to be living in plain sight. On August 10th, detectives obtained an arrest warrant. However, it wasn't until Tuesday that the Van Zant County Sheriff's Department in Texas arrived at his residence and took him into custody. He was charged with killing Susan after he was apprehended without trouble and checked into the Van Zant County Jail. More information regarding what Modesto police believe happened to Susan was withheld. Raymond Lewis is now in detention in Texas while awaiting extradition to California. It's unclear exactly how the detective narrowed in on him as a potential suspect. The Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office is receiving different unanswered questions from Modesto police, who claim they have no further information to share. The Modesto Police Department and the Stanislaus County District Attorney were contacted by newspapers and local radio stations to find out what happened before the suspect was taken into custody, but they did not receive a response. There was no information made public regarding Susan's exact cause of death, the possibility of finding her body, or the new evidence that led to Raymond Lewis charges. The Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office, the California Department of Justice, and several Texas authorities were thanked by Modesto police in a press release for their assistance during the protracted and difficult investigation. It stated that the collaborative efforts of these agencies have been instrumental in bringing closure to Susan Robin Bender's case. Detectives had a suspect almost immediately after they developed a suspicion of foul play. According to court documents filed in Stanislaus County, a month after Susan disappeared, Lewis was taken into custody on suspicion of a separate burglary, and investigators at the time tracked him down using the green van. At that time, his name had not been made public. During their investigation, they discovered that Raymond Stafford Lewis had collaborated briefly with Patricia Bender, Susan's mother. Patricia said at the time that she thought Lewis might have become close to her daughter after calling their house phone. According to court records, Patricia briefly worked for Stafford Lewis at his security company in 1985. They added that she acknowledged dating Lewis a couple of times. Susan knew Lewis well. Susan had been spotted getting into his rental van at the bus stop. Her friend, who was present at the bus station on the day she vanished, claims that she jumped into his van without hesitation. According to a former resident of Raymond Stafford's house in the 1980s, Stafford admitted to killing a woman by strangling her with a wire or cord and burying her close to the Big Oak Flat Yosemite entrance. According to court records that were obtained, he claimed to have driven to a campground close to Yosemite National Park's Big Oak Flat entrance and dug the grave. In the months following Susan's disappearance, 38-year-old Raymond Stafford filed to run for Modesto City Council. When the local newspaper inquired about his criminal history, he responded in July 1985 that it was just the consequence of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. His arrest records indicated that he was wearing a badge identifying him as a private investigator and running an unlicensed private investigation company. According to Stafford, the main focus of his campaign was enacting laws that would shield kids from predators. He continued, "We do not spend any time getting the people who are harassing our children." Not surprisingly, he was not elected. Stafford admitted to filing a false police report and was found guilty of setting a business on fire 5 months later. In December 1986, according to reports, he staged a kidnapping to get out of going to court. He reappeared on law enforcement's radar in 1994 for abusing a 13-year-old girl in California. He was listed as an offender under the alias Greg Tunningly on the offender registry. Stafford was revealed to be the man in new court documents. Patricia Bender disclosed that she had always believed Stafford was the reason for her daughter's disappearance, having learned the two had maintained a secret relationship. "I have known from the beginning when my daughter came up missing," Patricia stated. "I've been aware that he was the one behind it. I told the investigators so, but they ignored me." Patricia continued saying that for the previous 37 years, the thought had been a part of her. "Honestly, it felt like I was lost," she went on. "It appeared as though I were a dead woman walking. Hearing others talk about their grandchildren and children hurts." Patricia claimed that her motivation came from her 15-year-old daughter's memories. She recalled Susan's gregarious nature. She was a comic. She was just a typical adolescent trying to find her place, Patricia said. Patricia Bender never gave up, but up until this point, her search for her daughter had been excruciating. She mentioned having to rely on her faith. She said, "I am appreciative. I'm happy that the system has at last made the decision to act and stop leaving me in the dark." In order to bid Susan farewell, which they have always believed she deserves, those closest to her hope to find out where she is. Her mother now states in the final act that forgiveness for Stafford is the one thing she has never struggled with. "Although it may seem strange to say I have forgiven him for the harm he caused to my daughter. I truly have, since I don't want to live my entire life carrying that burden." Patricia claimed that a heavy cloud had been lifted from her shoulders by this arrest. "At this point, I am not excited about how the trial will proceed. I only want to locate Susan's body. My message is a simple one, she said in a closing remark. Pay attention to your children now. On April 20th, 1990, Corey Darden was born into a caring family in Utah. Raised with strong moral values and guidance from her parents, she grew up in a nurturing environment. Corey, a highly educated individual, holds a postgraduate degree in human resources and human resource management and service. In addition to her post-graduation, she earned a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration. Her professional background includes serving as an administrative assistant at Park Street Hospital and gaining experience as an enhanced patient services and specialty clinic trainee at Park City Medical Center. Corey Richens led the life of a prosperous young woman. On June 15, 2013, she married her boyfriend, Eric Richens, in an intimate backyard ceremony at their home in Camus, Utah. Their marriage was blessed with the arrival of 3 children. 3 adorable boys, Carter, Ashton, and Weston, as their family grew. Amidst all the joy, Corey was also thriving. She embarked on a career as a real estate agent and found success in the field as well. However, little by little cracks began to surface in her otherwise happy life. Financial struggles played the role of the antagonist in her narrative, causing shifts in Corey's personality in subsequent actions. Between 2015 and 2017, Corey acquired at least 4 life insurance policies on her husband, amassing nearly $2 million in coverage. Additionally, in September 2020, Eric discovered that Corey had allegedly obtained and utilized a $250,000 home equity line of credit on their Camus residence. She had also withdrawn over $100,000 from his bank accounts and spent more than $30,000 using his credit cards. When confronted about these financial discrepancies, agreed to repay him. In October 2020, without his wife's knowledge, Eric consulted both a divorce lawyer and an estate planning attorney. He took several significant steps to protect his assets, altering his will, establishing a living trust, and placing his estate under the management of his sister, Katie Rich and Spenson. Furthermore, he transferred his partnership interest in his business to the trust and designated it as the beneficiary of his $500,000 life insurance policy. Additionally, Eric and his business partner held $2 million life insurance policies, naming each other as beneficiaries. However, on January 1, 2022, attempted to change the policy, designate herself as the beneficiary. Eric discovered the alteration and reverted the beneficiary back to his business partner. Later that month, allegedly initiated the application process for a new $100,000 life insurance policy on Eric Richens' life. These circumstances pushed Corey to the brink, and gradually they were about to unfold into a horrifying series of events. We will soon return to these events. But first, let's delve into the day of Eric Richens' death. It was March 4, 2022, and the Richens family were all at home. It was a joyous evening, and they were celebrating Corey's successful business deal as a real estate agent. The cheerful evening slowly became a quiet night, with their 3 sons, Carter, Ashton, and Weston, sound asleep. Eric and Corey shared a few drinks before retiring to bed. But tragically, they had something else in store for 39-year-old Eric Richens. That very night, at around 3 in the morning, Corey, who was sleeping with their youngest son, per her statement later on, went to check on Eric in their master bedroom. To her shock, she discovered Eric lying unconscious on the floor, near the foot of his bed. Alarmed, Corey immediately dialed 911 for help. Upon arrival, the police determined that Eric had passed away due to a fentanyl overdose, a powerful synthetic opioid drug commonly used for pain relief. During the initial investigation, apart from the cause of death, no other significant clues emerged. However, a pressing question remained. How could Eric have succumbed to a drug overdose? This query prompted the police to explore all possible scenarios and avenues of investigation. To unravel the mystery, the police delved deep into the updates and dynamics within the Richens family. During the interviews, informed authorities that she and her husband were celebrating her recent property acquisition for her business. According to her account, she prepared a Moscow Mule in the kitchen and brought it to their bedroom, where Eric consumed it while sitting in bed. Corey later recounted to the authorities that she had fallen asleep in one of her children's rooms upon waking up and returning to her bedroom. She discovered her husband was cold to the touch. Allegedly, she attempted CPR on him. However, when medical and fire personnel arrived, they observed that it didn't seem like she had performed CPR, given the significant amount of blood that came from Eric's mouth. Moreover, Poised claimed that she had left her phone plugged into the bedroom, conflicted with the evidence found by investigators. They discovered her phone had been locked and unlocked multiple times, showing movement, before the emergency call to 911 was made. These inconsistencies heightened the initial suspicions, directing the police's focus towards a more thorough investigation. As time passed, investigators uncovered a crucial piece of information that would gradually unravel the case. They learned that shortly after her husband's death, Corey had reportedly hired a locksmith to drill into Eric's safe, which held between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. When Eric Richardson's sister, Katie Richens Benson, advised Corey to leave the safe untouched, Corey reacted with anger, physically assaulting Richens Benson by punching her in the face and neck. These actions raised further suspicion to the unfolding investigation. As the investigations honed in on Corey Richens, the police uncovered a wealth of additional information, painting a clearer and more intricate picture of the situation at hand. At the time of her husband's death, Corey Richens was allegedly in dire financial straits, owing over $1 million. On March 3, 2022, the day before her husband passed away, she had a significant conversation with a moneylender to whom she owed at least $1.8 million and had a lengthy telephone call with the IRS. Additionally, she had outstanding state and federal tax liabilities amounting to $189,840. Moreover, was indebted to her husband, owing him at least $514,346. These staggering financial troubles added a compelling layer to the investigation, further intensifying the scrutiny on Corey. On February 14, 2022, what was supposed to be a romantic Valentine's Day meal turned into a terrifying ordeal for Eric. After eating a sandwich his wife made for him, he broke out into hives and struggled to breathe. Investigators discovered that Corey had prepared a sandwich and left it on the seat of Eric's truck, accompanied by a love note. However, soon after consuming it, Eric fell seriously ill and had to use their son's EpiPen. There was a strong suspicion that he had been poisoned with an allergen, although this was never confirmed. Worried about the possibility of poisoning, confided in a friend, sharing his concerns that his wife might be trying to harm him. Moreover, in the aftermath of Eric's death, Richens Benson took the proactive step of hiring a private investigator to monitor and shadow Corey. This decision stemmed from Corey's attempt to remove her sister-in-law as the trustee of Eric Richardson's trust, leading Richens Benson to suspect Corey's involvement in her brother's demise. A legal battle ensued between Corey and her sister-in-law over the trust and estate matters since Eric Richardson's passing. Corey later claimed that the private investigator frequently parked outside her home, conducting surveillance and questioning her neighbors about her and her husband. During interviews, Greg Scordes, a spokesperson for Eric Richardson's family, stated that the private investigator was hired to investigate Eric's death. However, the private investigator declined to comment on the case. The mounting evidence and intricate details unearthed by investigators pointed towards Corey from multiple angles. However, the investigators aimed to compile a comprehensive and irrefutable report striving to conclusively close this case once and for all. A year after her husband's tragic passing on March 7, 2023, Corey published a book titled, Are You With Me? And dedicated to Eric Richens, who according to her was an amazing husband and wonderful father. In an interview, discussed her book and her husband's death, describing it as happening unexpectedly. However, at that time, she remained unaware that she was at the center of suspicion. Before she fully grasped the gravity of the accusations against her, Corey was arrested on May 8, 2023, on charges of aggravated murder and 3 counts of possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. She was held in custody at Summit County Jail in Park City, Utah, awaiting trial. Prosecutors disclosed that Corey had slipped 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl into the cocktail on the night of Eric's death. Subsequently, she left him in bed and slept with one of the younger children. Upon checking on him around 3 a.m., Eric had already passed away and was unresponsive. Corey's phone was also collected on the day of her arrest, as prosecutors revealed that it was located in the dresser drawer on her side of the bed during the second search of her home on the day she was arrested. Following the discovery of Corey's phone, her search history unveiled some intricate details. It was revealed that she had searched for the address of the lead detectives on the case, but her actions didn't end there. The search history indicated that Corey had also sought out contact information for the relative of the second lead detective online. Research history provided a troubling glimpse into her thoughts. Among her searches was luxury prisons for the rich in America. She also looked into whether she would receive a life insurance payment if her husband's cause of death was listed as pending. Most disturbingly, she conducted a search related to a lethal dose of fentanyl, indicating a deeper and concerning line of inquiry. Furthermore, investigators discovered a key witness who could potentially help solve the case once and for all. While the person's name was never disclosed, she was identified only by her initials, CL. In early 2022, contacted CL, as per the contact saved on Corey's phone, and requested fentanyl, the drug that proved fatal for Eric. Phone records indicated multiple calls and text messages between Corey and CL in January 2022. However, authorities were unable to ascertain the precise content of these messages because Corey allegedly deleted data from her phone between January 2, 2022 and shortly after Eric Richardson's death. During the interview, informed authorities that she acquired the fentanyl pills and handed them over to Corey in a direct transaction either on February 11th or February 12th, 2022. In late February, Corey once more reached out to CL, expressing dissatisfaction with the strength of the fentanyl and requesting a more potent supply. During this conversation, Corey allegedly asked CL for some Michael Jackson stuff, referencing the way that Michael Jackson died due to a drug overdose. CL confirmed to the authorities that she had obtained what Corey requested once again. Corey wrote a backdated check for $1,300 to obtain fentanyl from CL. According to CL, on either March 9th or March 10th, she left the fentanyl pills in a fire pit located in the backyard of a home owned by Richens. This statement and evidence became pivotal in establishing Corey's responsibility. However, on June 10, 2023, lawyers representing Corey Richens argued for her release, completely denying the allegations. In a court filing that summer, they contended that there was no substantial evidence to support the charges. According to her legal team, not a single text message or document had been presented during discovery to substantiate the claim that Eric ever believed Corey attempted to poison him. Later on August 18th, prosecutors for Summit County informed the court that they had decided not to pursue the death penalty after careful consultation with the sisters and father of Eric Richens. On September 18th, prosecutors accused Corey of witness tampering, alleging that she had asked her brother to fabricate a false story about her husband supposedly buying drugs. In a court filing, prosecutors revealed that they found the request in a 6-page letter in Corey's cell at Summit County Jail in Park City. After a recent court hearing, Corey Richens was declared to be a substantial danger to society, leading the judge to rule that she would be safer behind bars. While the verdict is pending, it is undeniably evident that Corey Richens will spend a significant amount of time behind bars, bringing the case to its conclusion. In her own apartment, a young lady was discovered dead. Police launched an investigation, but they turned up no leads. Before a breakthrough in the case was eventually achieved, it took 40 years. But in addition to the truth, detectives also learned new concerning information. On March 30th, 1960, in the state of Virginia, Robin Brooks was born. She moved to the small town of Highland in New York as a child. Along with her family, Robin was a happy, outgoing individual who had a large circle of friends and was always able to find common ground with others. She was very close to her older sister Maria as well. Following graduation, Robin chose to relocate to California. The young woman had another important reason for moving besides the fact that the state's climate intrigued her. Robin chose to follow her sister, who had gone there not long before. The young lady found employment in Sacramento after moving into an apartment. She was given the chance to relocate to a residential complex where her sister and her boyfriend resided a few months later. Not only were the apartments noticeably better, but Robin was also able to spend more time with Maria, and she made the decision to move just before turning 20. The young woman had to work 2 jobs to pay the rent for her separate apartment. Within walking distance of her apartment complex was a donut shop where she worked as a cashier. In order to combine it with her second job, Robin opted for the evening shift. For approximately 1.5 months, the young lady resided in this complex and made a lot of friends at work and outside of it. She was happy to be able to see her sister on a daily basis once more. Robin was scheduled to begin her shift at the donut shop at 4 p.m. on April 24, 1980, but her coworkers were shocked when she failed to show up. She never missed a shift while working there, and she frequently arrived even earlier than expected, so this was extremely unusual. After waiting for several hours, one of the staff members made the decision to visit Robin's apartment. When the colleague knocked on the door, nothing happened. There was just silence. After several unsuccessful attempts, he returned back and informed them that the young woman was not responding. Colleagues were quite alarmed by this information, since they assumed that if Robin had not called to explain why she could not make it to work, something might have happened to her. She had made friends with every employee in the short time she had been at their store, and they genuinely cared about her well-being. Cow workers thought about phoning the police, but they soon found out that they would not look for Robin, just because she missed a shift. Then one of them made an unconventional suggestion. He offered to open her apartment's front door to see if she was all right. He went to her house with some colleagues, and after a few minutes of knocking on the door, they decided to break in. When they succeeded, they were met with a startling sight. Everything in the living room was covered in blood as Robin lay there on her waterbed. Her colleagues called the police right away, and when they arrived, they were able to confirm the young woman's death. Her body was covered in multiple stab wounds that appeared to have been caused by an unidentified attacker who stabbed her with a knife and repeatedly punctured the waterbed, spilling its contents onto the ground. The police determined, upon reviewing the crime scene, that until Robin's associates opened the entrance door, there were no indications of a break-in. They thought the murderer had broken in through a window because the back door was likewise locked from the inside. Fingerprints on the windowsill were soon discovered by forensic experts, providing credence to this theory. Medical examiners found that the victim had been sexually raped and had acquired biological material from the offender. Additionally, there are small amounts of blood in the apartment that do not match Robin's blood type. After coming to the conclusion that the murderer had cut himself during the assault, investigators sent blood samples to a lab. Unfortunately, they were unable to use this evidence in the 1980s because DNA analysis was not yet available. Starting with her coworkers, investigators interviewed the victim's acquaintances. They claimed that the young woman had left for home the previous day after her shift ended at midnight. She was joking around and acting normally. Nothing at that point suggested that something was wrong. One interesting fact that Robin's coworkers brought up was that she had washed her bedding the day before and was concerned about it drying in time before her return home. Detectives concluded that the victim was attacked shortly after returning home because the bed in her apartment had not been made. Her sister brought up a concerning observation as well. Robin had mentioned being followed by a man a few days prior to her passing. She claimed that this man had visited her store multiple times and had behaved strangely in an attempt to win her affection. But she did not offer any information that would help identify him. But Robin did not take it seriously because he had done nothing to cause her to worry about her safety. Because there were no distinguishing features, the police were unable to identify this individual. They spoke with the victim's neighbors and carried out more investigation, but they were unable to find any leads. That night, none of them heard any screams or sounds of struggle. Additionally, the neighbors did not witness any strangers paying the victim a visit. Investigators also discovered that Robin did not leave work that evening directly for home. She briefly attended a party with her friends before leaving. Her friends claimed that she left the party alone, and that there were no awkward moments or confrontations. After speaking with everyone present, the police came to the conclusion that they were most likely not responsible for her death. The investigation eventually came to a standstill. There were no possible suspects. Robin had good relationships with her neighbors and co-workers. She did not have a boyfriend, and she did not know anyone from her past who would have wanted her to suffer. At the time, biological and blood samples were unable to identify the murderer, and matching fingerprints to already existing databases produced no gits. Robin had mentioned a frequent customer of the store, and investigators thought that person was the murderer. Based on their theory, the man tracked the victim from her place of employment to her residence, obtaining her precise address. He waited for her the next day while she was at the store, breaking in through a window into her apartment. He attacked Robin when she got home, brutalized and killed her, and then ran away. Even with no evidence at all, the investigation went on for a while before coming to a standstill. 24 years after the murder, the investigation was finally reopened in 2004. At that point, DNA analysis was a commonly employed technique, and investigators were hopeful that it would aid in identifying the murderer. They send biological material and blood to a lab where specialists take a DNA profile and enter it into the FBI database, but they are unable to find any matches. This indicated that the murderer was either not a repeat offender or that the crime was committed before mandatory DNA collection for such offenders. Still, investigators were met with a disturbing finding in the California State Database. 3 weeks prior to Robin's demise, another crime was committed that the killer's DNA profile matched. At that moment, a mystery man had broken into the house of another young lady, raped her, and then left her unharmed. The young woman did not see the attacker's face because it was all at night. After she called the police right away, forensic specialists were able to take the man's biological material. In an attempt to finally identify Robin's killer, detectives searched for fresh leads in this case, but all of their efforts were fruitless. Investigators were eventually left to periodically cross-reference the DNA profile with databases in the unlikely event that the killer came to light and his DNA was added to existing databases when the case ultimately went cold again. This persisted until 2017 when investigators learned about a novel technique known as DNA phenotyping. In essence, genetic specialists examine a DNA sample and, using their interpretation of the data, approximate a suspect's profile. This is not an exact method. Rather, it is an additional police guideline. Investigators can examine closely at suspects who are similar to one another or remove someone from the list. With the aid of such a portrait, investigators resorted to Parban nanolabs, which carried out similar studies, and they quickly created a rough sketch of the murderer. He turned out to be an African-American man. But among all the people who even vaguely appeared in the case, investigators could not find anyone who looked similar. 2 portraits were created by Parban nanolabs. One depicted the suspect's potential appearance in 1980, and the other in 2017. In an effort to generate fresh leads, the media released both photos. Robin's family members also hoped to learn the truth at last. Thus, they made the decision to offer a $10,000 reward for any information leading to the location of this individual. The police got a number of tips, but none of them produced any results. They never did find out who the real criminal was. Nevertheless, the detectives and Robin's family members were not going to give up. This case was added to the list of unsolved homicides in 2020 for which funding was increased. By then, a new DNA analysis tool was under active use that made it possible to find the DNA sample owner's distant relatives. In order for this to happen, at least one kinship relative of his needed to be listed in state or public DNA databases. After delivering the Robin's killer sample to the Parban nanolabs experts, they waited. It took them several months to research the criminal's potential relatives, follow their family trees, and identify a credible suspect. The detectives were able to obtain a name at last. Philip Wilson, who was 71 years old at the time, but the findings of the study did not support his guilt. It was imperative that the police obtain his DNA and compare it to the sample discovered in the victim's apartment. After finding out this man's address, they started keeping an eye on him. Given that it is not legally required for someone to give a sample of their DNA, the police must use some creative tactics. They frequently make an effort to obtain something that the suspect may have touched. Could be a cigarette, but a water bottle, or anything else. After obtaining everything they required, investigators turned the sample of DNA over to specialists. In Wilson's case, investigators proceeded in a similar manner, sending an item containing his DNA to a laboratory. Experts discovered a perfect match. The likely murderer was eventually located 40 years later, and the same year, on February 24th, he was taken into custody. Although the man denied being involved in the murder, the evidence pointed to his guilt. Additionally, the suspect's fingerprints were collected by the police, and they matched those on the windowsill. After reading his biography, the detectives discovered a wealth of fascinating information. The man, who was 31 at the time of Robin's murder, resided a short distance from her complex. Wilson also frequently visited the domet shop where the victim was employed. This supported the police's initial theory that the murderer was the same unidentified stalker who had been bothering the young employee. The man's lack of a significant criminal record could account for the lack of his fingerprints and DNA in the databases. The lengthy trial preparations that followed his arrest continued for a number of years. Wilson and his legal representatives had already prepared a fresh line of defense by the time the process started in 2022. According to his attorney, Philip and Robin had a consensual relationship that evening. And then the man went home and someone else broke into the young woman's apartment and killed her. Regarding the blood found at the scene of the crime, the suspect's attorney maintained that Wilson had cut himself while at work and that the wound had burst when he was at Robin's house. This version of events was deemed ludicrous by the prosecution. First of all, there was no romantic relationship between the victim and anyone. Additionally, she reported that Wilson was probably the strange man who was harassing her at work. His actions and persistence irritated the young woman, and they had no sympathy for one another. Secondly, the victim's apartment did not contain any additional male DNA traces. Assuming that Wilson left behind his DNA, blood, and fingerprints while the murderer left nothing at all would be bizarre. Moreover, the young woman contacted him voluntarily if the suspect's attorney is to be believed, but not before she had made the bed, which was devoid of any bedding, for whatever reason. Additionally, Wilson's defense attempted to identify a different suspect as the potential murderer. It was the person Maria was living with at the time, her ex-boyfriend. The man was deceased at the time of the trial, and the attorney made use of this information. He made an effort to persuade the jury that the man was vile, had threatened Robin and her sister, and had broken into the victim's flat. Still, nothing was verifiable. Thus, none of these remarks significantly affected the legal system. Philip Wilson was consequently found guilty of murder. On his birthday, the news of his sentence was released. The man was given an indeterminate life sentence without the chance of release. Given his numerous health issues at the moment, his prison sentence is unlikely to be lengthy. The victim's family expressed gratitude to the detectives for concluding the case at last. After all, her sister acknowledged, Robert moved to California to follow her, and she still feels guilty. Regarding the young lady Wilson, had raped 3 weeks prior to the murder, the man was spared further punishment because the statute of limitations had passed. Detectives are still curious, though, if Wilson had any other victims. When criminals commit such heinous crimes, usually a few weeks pass between them, they do not stop and carry on harming people. Wilson may not have intended for her to die. After breaking into Robin's apartment and attacking her, she may have recognized Wilson's face from his frequent visits to her store. The man might have chosen to kill someone and then give up on committing other crimes out of fear of going to prison. 30 years old in 1986, Teresa Scoff, a compassionate nurse, was employed at Lakeland Regional Health in Florida. She cherished caring for her 8-year-old son, Jason, and helping others. As a single mother living in a tiny apartment with her partner, Jason was her only family. Teresa always had a smile on her face, and she had green eyes and brown hair. She was a happy, outgoing person who made lots of friends both in her neighborhood and at work. She loved to watch movies, read books, and spend time with her son. She enjoyed learning new things and traveling as well. One day, she hoped to become a doctor and help save more lives. Teresa was alone in her apartment on October 15, 1986, a night when Jason was spending time with his grandmother, Betty. Rain was falling heavily on that gloomy and stormy night. A man she didn't know broke into her house. He intended to hurt Teresa and he carried a knife. His prints were on the windowsill and the doorknob. In addition, he had dropped a cigarette butt on the floor and left his DNA on it. He tried to push himself on Teresa and attacked her with his knife. Teresa used every ounce of strength to fight back. She attempted to defend herself with her hands, but he seriously hurt them. Because he was stronger than she was, he severely injured her throat. He killed her, leaving her body on the floor, then ran out of the apartment. When Teresa failed to arrive at work the following morning, Teresa's mother Betty became worried and went to check on her. Teresa's body was discovered in a bloody puddle. The police showed up at the apartment after she called them. From the crime scene, they gathered every piece of evidence and stored it for later use. Investigators interviewed a large number of suspects and pursued leads, but they were unable to identify the culprit and the case was abandoned. Grady Judd, the Polk County Sheriff, finally declared the case solved on October 16, 2023. They were able to establish Teresa's injuries were caused by Donald Douglas. Douglas committed the crime when he was 33 years old. Along with his brother, he co-owned an electrical company. In 2008, Donald Douglas, then 54 years old, passed away from natural causes. It was made more difficult to link him to the case because he had no prior criminal record and was cremated after his death. Teresa's mother, Betty Scalf, and two of her sisters attended a press conference with Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, who gave an account of how his department resolved the 37-year-old case. Donald Douglas, according to Sheriff Judd, lived directly behind the duplex. Investigators interviewed Donald Douglas and other neighbors when he lived right behind the duplex, but they never thought of him as a suspect. According to Grady Judd, Douglas had no visible wounds, and there was no reason for the initial detectives to suspect him. Judd surmised that Douglas killed Teresa because he wanted a relationship with her, but she turned him down. Judd clarified that in the early 2000s, the agency entered DNA from the crime scene into the FBI's national database, but due to technological advancements, no matches were found, indicating that the perpetrator's DNA had not been entered. After obtaining the case in 2015, Judd gave Detective Matthew Newbold credit for spearheading the effort to solve it. Teresa Scalf's picture was a permanent fixture on Newbold's desk, and he promised her family he wouldn't leave until he had found the criminal. Othram, a Texas-based business that specializes in creating genetic samples from crime scene evidence, collaborated with Newbold. With the use of publicly available DNA submitted by users of programs like 23andMe, the company assisted in building the suspect's family tree. Donald Douglas's third cousin, who had conceived a child outside of marriage in 1949, was the target of one hit. In the end, what Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd called the illicit affair revealed a new branch of the family tree. According to David Nutting, an official from Othram, it was the 106th publicly disclosed resolution to an unresolved case using Othram's DNA research. According to him, there are an estimated 330,000 unresolved cases in the U.S. When Douglas was found to be the culprit, the sheriff's detectives got in touch with his son and requested a sample of his DNA. He fully cooperated. Judd stated, and was mortified to learn that his sample confirmed that Donald Douglas's blood had been found at the crime scene. Teresa's sister, Pam, stated, "The first thing that I would like to say is Teresa was a wonderful person. The most loving person. She did not deserve it. Our family did not deserve this." She added, "She started off at the bottom nursing assistant. She went to respiratory school. She got her registered nurse license and was so proud. I have never seen anyone more proud. She said, 'I did it, Pom. I did it.' And she lost her life a month later after we had this conversation. I hope it gives everybody comfort to know that we now know who did this. I also would like to offer encouragement to other victims. Do not give up. Law enforcement does not give up. And as long as they do not give up, you do not give up." Lynn Scarf, Teresa's other sister, said that Teresa did disclose that she had some uncomfortable experiences with her neighbor. Although Teresa did not fully describe that neighbor, Lynn Scarf used Teresa's story as a warning to victims of stalking who are victims today. Teresa had told us about some creepy neighbor that had showed up at her house with what looked like he had yanked a flower up out of the ground and slapped it into a pot. He was sort of stalkerish, and she had told us about him, but she never described him to anybody. Especially ladies, if someone is being creepy, do not just tell your sisters. Tell them what he looks like. Betty Scarf, Teresa's mother, spoke to the media and said, "All I want to say is I am 84 years old. I lived to see this done. I think that is why I lived so long." On September 4th, 2012, at 5:35 p.m., Yonkers Police Department officers responded to a 911 call regarding a suspicious package discovered in the woods. First responders discovered a decomposing human body wrapped in a large black garbage bag when they arrived at the scene. After taking over the investigation, detectives from the department's Major Case Squad and Crime Scene Unit identified the victim as 26-year-old Pamela Graddick, a resident of the Bronx. In an effort to hide the crime, Pamela's killer had shot her twice in the head outside of Yonkers, according to investigators, and then dumped her in the woods. Early in the investigation, Wanda Verhila was marked as a person of interest by the police. She was Pamela's girlfriend, and they shared an apartment together. Wanda Verhila informed Pamela's family 1 month prior to her body being discovered on August 13, 2012, that although Pamela had vanished over the weekend, the things she was supposed to have taken with her remained in their apartment. Pamela's family reported her missing to New York City police when they discovered she hadn't shown up for work either. According to the investigators, the smaller Wanda Verhila could not have moved the larger Pamela's body from their apartment to the isolated spot in the woods. After a 2-year investigation, the case was turned over to the Yonkers Police Department Cold Case Unit because the investigators were unable to find enough evidence to bring charges upon anyone. In January 2022, Wanda Verhila, who was then 41 years old, was interviewed by investigators. In the course of the interview, Verhila admitted to killing Pamela. She claimed that because of their continuous domestic problems, she had shot Pamela inside their shared Bronx apartment. She claimed that John Torres gave her the weapon. Additionally, she had also moved the body from their apartment to the woods with Torres' assistance. Wanda Verhila and John Torres were both placed under arrest in March of 2022. Torres was accused of hindering and tampering with physical evidence, first-degree prosecution, second-degree criminal facilitation, and other felonies. After the arrests, City of Yonkers Police Commissioner John J. Mueller issued a statement in which he said, "The passage of time only reinforces our commitment to solving these heinous crimes. The Yonkers Police prides itself on focusing on victims and their families and doing whatever we can to deliver justice for them. I hope that these arrests bring some degree of closure to Pamela's family and friends, and I applaud the extraordinary efforts of our cold case detectives in closing out this case after so many years. Well done." Wanda Verhila was given a 20-year to life sentence in June 2023 for killing Pamela Graddick. In court, Tawana McClellan, Pamela's sister, said, "You took my sister from me. You took my sister from all of us, and I hope that burns in your soul." On May 11, 2007, 64 years old, Dennis Lee First was found deceased in his condominium in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He had died from beatings and stabbings. Tammy Mimes, the assistant manager of the Hawthorne Hills Apartments, where Dennis lives, informed the police that he had prostate cancer. He had few visitors and lived off of Social Security. Tammy said she got a call from a friend asking her to check on Dennis, and she told the apartment's maintenance worker, Robert Gross. Robert knocked on Dennis' door several times. He entered the house after not hearing back. He found Dennis there, lying face up on the bed with his feet propped up on the floor. Robert called 911 as soon as he noticed there was a lot of blood. The evidence collected at the scene was carefully submitted for examination to the State Crime Lab of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. Dennis' first wife, Christine Griffin, claimed that he had a challenging life. "It's unbelievable that someone would stab him. He could hardly get around." Dennis and Christine had 2 children. Their son Brad was born in 1963 and their daughter Laura was born in 1965. In the 1970s, the couple lived in Olin Jones County, where Dennis worked for the Monticello Steel Company as a purchasing agent. Dennis has lived in Cedar Rapids since the divorce in 1981. In 1990, Dennis was arrested on charges of driving under the influence and stealing from local businesses. Furthermore, he was accused of threatening a man whose room he had rented. After Dennis' son died in a car accident in 1993, his life didn't get any better. Dennis, who had initially lost contact with his daughter, his ex-wife, and other family members, started reaching out to them again a few years before he died in late May 2007. During the investigation into Dennis' death, Cedar Rapids police executed 5 search warrants. They looked through Dennis' apartment and also the apartment of a man named Curtis Paget, whom witnesses said must have had an argument with the victim. Curtis's fingerprints and a DNA sample from a cheek swab were gathered by investigators. Additionally, they took a pair of his boots from his apartment. Curtis Paget is also said to be a person of interest in an unrelated missing person case. He was the last person to have seen 15-year-old Erin Pospisil before she disappeared from Cedar Rapids on June 3, 2001. When the police questioned him at the time, Curtis mentioned that in 2001, having gone to visit Erin's elder brother, who was a friend of his, he and Erin departed the Pospisil family home and they offered to give Erin a ride to her destination, which was her friend Brett's house. According to Curtis, on getting to Brett's residence, there was no one at the house. Shortly after, a black Chevrolet Cavalier with tinted rear windows pulled up to the curb. As Erin was making her way back to his truck, Curtis said Erin went up to the car and had a quick conversation with those in it. Before getting into the back seat of the Cavaliers, she told Curtis that the guys in the car would give her a ride. Ever since Erin left her home with Curtis Paget, she has never been seen or heard from again. No additional witnesses have been found by the police to corroborate Paget's report of seeing a black Cavalier in the neighborhood. However, on March 1, 2023, 42-year-old Curtis Randall Paget was taken into custody and charged with Dennis First's murder. This specific case demonstrates the Cedar Rapids Police Department's commitment to the community and its victims, according to Lynn County Attorney Nick Maybanks. This incident shows the department's determination to bring victims and survivors' rights to justice, even in cases where the general public may not be aware of them. After several months of investigation and a recent last meeting, Maybanks came to the conclusion that Paget was to blame for Dennis' demise. The reason Paget was arrested was not disclosed by the police, nor was it indicated if additional DNA testing was necessary after the department's cold case team approached them to assess the situation. Still, during the press conference, a partial blood boot print that matched boots discovered at Paget's house was disclosed. An oven mitt smeared with blood was also found. The oven mitt's interior contains DNA from Paget and Dennis. Additionally, Paget's fingerprint was found on a knife sharpener and in a drawer in Dennis' apartment. Since her sighting in the spring of 2002, Erin's case has not further progressed. Erin was spotted in a convenience store in Cedar Rapids. She was in an automobile with Illinois license plates in the back seat. Cedar Rapids police received this report, but the car was nowhere to be found. They have never been able to verify the sighting. The person who saw Erin is still positive that it was her because he was familiar with her. Erin's features describe her as a Caucasian female with dark brown hair and eyes. When Erin disappeared, her hair had red highlights and there was a small scar above her eye. If you know anything about her or the case, call the Cedar Rapids Police Department. Now let us head to Cincinnati, an Ohio city with a thriving arts community. In the Cincinnati metropolitan area, the city serves as an economic and cultural hub. It is the largest metropolitan area in Ohio and the 31st largest in the country, with an estimated population of 2.2 million. In order to conduct a wellness check, the Cincinnati police arrived at the 2500 block of Sarvis Court in Cincinnati on February 15, 2003. This occurred as a result of a 911 call about a potent and unsettling smell coming from the apartment. Authorities discovered a deceased man named Herman Brown after entering the apartment. He was naked and lifeless on the floor, with an extension cord tightly wrapped around his neck and multiple stab wounds. The scene was extremely horrific and unsettling. because they also discovered blood traces in the bathroom sink. There is not a lot of information available about the man who died, and it is possible that the police withheld information in order to protect his privacy. At the scene of the crime, detectives collected a variety of evidence strewn throughout the apartment, such as blood from the bathroom sink, cigarette butts, and the victim's swab. 2 DNA profiles were found after this evidence was tested. One belonged to Brown and the other to an unidentified person. The investigators searched for the unknown DNA match but were unsuccessful. This set of circumstances led to the homicide case being dropped, leaving Brown's horrible killer free to roam the streets. It would stay that way until 2023 when something revolutionary happened. The solution to solving the case turned out to be genetic genealogy testing. In order to identify suspects who might not be located in traditional law enforcement databases, the DNA profile recovered from the cigarette butts was re-examined and added to a forensic genetic genealogy search. This innovative method produced a match, connecting the DNA to Robert Stewart, a 64-year-old man. In order to validate this link, detectives performed more DNA testing, which finally proved that Stewart's DNA was on the cigarette butts from the crucial night of Brown's murder. On September 15, 2023, Stewart was finally taken into custody in Lima, Ohio, and was later extradited back to Hamilton County. He is presently being detained at the Justice Center with a $500,000 bond. He faces up to a life sentence if found guilty of the 2 murder counts and 1 felonious assault count against him. Melissa Powers, the Hamilton County prosecutor, praised the Cincinnati Police Homicide Unit. She highlighted the detectives' never-ending dedication to their cases and the victims they were assisting, praising their dedication. She underlined that no matter how long it takes to solve the case, they are dedicated to seeking justice. Powers also conveyed her appreciation for giving Brown's family and friends a sense of closure, saying that Robert Stewart's long-awaited arrest had brought much-needed justice and closure to this devastating case. 17-year-old Gladys Serrano lived in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles in 1996. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had big dreams for her life. Gladys was last seen on January 28, 1996, leaving her home. When she failed to return home later in the day, she was reported missing by her family. 2 days later, her body was found off a main road in a ravine in Topanga Canyon. She had been assaulted and strangled. Serology evidence was collected from her body, and a DNA profile of the unknown offender was uploaded to the state and federal DNA databases, but a match could not be found. An extensive investigation was completed by the investigators at the time, but it led nowhere and the case went cold until 2019, when Los Angeles police arrested a man by the name of Jose Luis Garcia for domestic assault. During the booking process, DNA swabs were taken from Garcia and processed. Investigators then realized that his DNA matched the DNA that was taken from Gladys Arellano's body. Detectives visited Garcia and questioned him about Gladys. The crime took place when he was just 19 years old. They obtained a second DNA swab from him. The Los Angeles Crime Lab was then able to confirm that Garcia's genetic profile matched the unidentified sample taken from Gladys's body in 1996. 43-year-old Jose Luis Garcia was arrested by U.S. Marshals on September 29, 2019 in Dallas, Texas. He was extradited on October 14 to Los Angeles County, where he was held on a $1 million bail. Detective Hugo Rienarga said this case is typical of the type of unsolved cases that the detectives are faced with on a daily basis. We are gratified that we are successful in bringing this tragic case to a close. Rienarga confirmed that investigators were looking into the possibility that Garcia was involved in other crimes as well. Gladys Arellano's niece and goddaughter, Samantha Moreno, spoke movingly of the need to remember her godmother as well as all other women who were victims of violence. Recognizing her life is important. Beautiful Latina souls from Boyle Heights should never be forgotten. Moreno said acts of violence against women should never be forgotten. Samantha Moreno thanked the detectives who never lost sight of finding justice. Gladys Serrano's case was worked on by retired detectives Joe Purcell and Sean McCarthy, who both work part-time on the Sheriff's Department's Unsolved Case Unit. Thank you for not giving up on our Gladys, who was a loving daughter, sister, aunt, and godmother. Gladys was only 17 when her life was taken. She had a beautiful soul. She was beautiful, intelligent, gorgeous, and she had a radiant smile. She had such big dreams for her life. My grandparents would have been so proud of her, Samantha Moreno said. She was grateful Garcia was off the streets after nearly a quarter century. We want nothing more than for him to pay for his brutal crime, she said. We recognize that this will not bring Gladys back, but we are relieved to know that there will be justice for Gladys. This is a victory that we acknowledge in her honor, and we look forward to more victories. Jose Luis Garcia was found guilty of all the charges against him on July 18, 2023. It was a day the loved ones of Gladys Orellano had been waiting decades for. It is never enough for having taken the life of such a beautiful soul, said Elizabeth Orellano, Gladys Orellano's sister and best friend. She told the court what Garcia did nearly destroyed them as they wondered for more than 25 years what happened to her. It was tough, but it felt really good to finally get it off your chest and actually like seeing him and, releasing it and having some kind of comfort, said Vanessa Orellano, Gladys Orellano's younger sister. Janet Ramirez, Gladys' close friend, said the plea deal gives her some comfort, but it is not enough. 19 years is never enough, but I have comfort knowing now she can rest, that the perpetrator is going to be behind bars, because for 25 years, I've lived with the guilt of not knowing what I could have done different, Ramirez said. Jose Luis Garcia was sentenced on August 15, 2023 to 18 years and 8 months in prison for taking Gladys Orellano's life. Garcia pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and domestic assault. According to the district attorney's office, he waived his credit for the just over 1,000 he has spent in jail since his 2020 arrest. Retired Sheriff's Detective Joe Purcell, who handled the cold case investigation, said, "The fact is that we can give justice to people and to society. It is really important not to let these cases go unresolved. We need to have people pay the debt they owe to society." A group of kids playing off of Amherst Street in Granby, Massachusetts, found a woman's body on November 15, 1978. Buried under a pile of leaves, investigators were able to determine that she had been fatally shot in the temple. There was also evidence that the woman's body was dragged by a man's belt. It was estimated that her life was taken roughly 3 months before her body was found. Investigators were unfortunately unable to identify the woman. So, for decades, she became known as Granby Girl and was buried in a local cemetery with a headstone marked unknown. On March 6, 2023, the Northwest District Attorney's Office held a news conference at the Granby Police Station to announce the major breakthrough in the case. It was announced that the remains found back in 1978 belonged to 28-year-old Patricia and Tucker. First Assistant District Attorney Stephen Gagney said advances in DNA technology allowed them to find Patricia's half-sister in Maryland who led them to her son. He was just 5 years old when Patricia vanished. Stephen Gagney said, "While it is satisfying to finally know who Granby Girl actually was, the investigation will not stop until we identify the person that took her life and bring the family an additional measure of closure and justice. This investigation has spanned decades and will continue until each and every possible lead is explored." Stephen Gagney further said Patricia was married to Gerald Coleman and they were living on the shore of Lake Pocotopog in East Hampton, Connecticut, back in 1978. Coleman never reported his wife missing. He passed away in prison in Massachusetts in 1996. According to Stephen Gagney, Coleman is now a person of interest in Patricia's case. Before her disappearance, Patricia had earlier gone by married names such as Patricia Heckman, Patricia Dale, and later Patricia Coleman. Anyone with information about the case should call Granby Police at 413-4679-222 or email dwight@granbypd.org. Patricia's son, Matthew Dale, who is now 50 years old, also spoke and recalled his last memories of his mother. She was in the front seat of a stranger's car, wearing a vest. It was 1978. Matthew was in the back seat. A man he did not know was driving, but Matthew vividly recalls the last words his mother ever said to him before she disappeared. "She told me to go across the street to the playground," Matthew said, referring to a group home for juveniles. "She said goodbye." Now in middle age, Matthew's memories are fuzzy. Best he can recall, the facility was outside Boston. His father collected him the following day and raised him after his mother left him. Matthew has lived in North Carolina most of his life. He grew up plagued by the mystery of his mother's disappearance. Rumors swirled among family members, including speculation that Patricia may have entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. Matthew said that he was in his 30s when he accepted that his mother was no longer alive. "My mother fell in with the wrong crowd. She was not a hiker like some of the stories said through the years. I've been told so many lies about it." His father passed away in 2015 and Dale has felt somewhat adrift, although he is happily married. He is a father and has been a union electrician for most of his life. Several weeks before the identification was made, police showed up at his door. They asked him a few questions, explaining they found him through his uncle in a DNA database. They said, "Granby girl." "I thought, what is Granby girl?" Matthew said. State police investigators did not offer many details, but said they had exhumed Patricia's body. Matthew had filed his DNA in a database in case his mother was ever identified. He sent investigators a file of his digital DNA profile, and they contacted him by phone within hours. They said it was a clear genetic match. He has scanned keepsakes of his mom, a single photo baby book she created for him, a lock of his hair, and a small tapestry she painted when he was small. Matthew said he plans to arrange for a proper grave for his mother. For years, the grave has been marked only with a wooden cross. In 1998, Granby residents donated money to create a more dignified marker. Matthew said it was an awful end. "What I want to do is have a new gravestone made for her. She deserves to have her name on it." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.